Today's topic, as it was mentioned, is about user acceptance testing. We know that it can be really stressful, so today I would like to share my experience gained on various projects and give you some insights on how you can be best prepared for such phases of the delivery. At this stage, let me share a personal story with you. One day in the past, my manager came to me and asked the question, Zoltan, are we fully prepared from the delivery point of view? And yeah, at that time, I need to admit that I was a bit nervous because it was said that in the next month, you need to travel to the client's office and we need to have a release sign-off. So I had a question in my mind. Okay, so how can we approach this? And yeah, today our aim would be to find all the possible answers. So let's see what we're going to cover today. First, I will talk about before the UAT, like key considerations from the quality assurance perspective. The next one is about the most common pitfalls. And lastly, I will share a practical approach named the UAT governance framework. So let's get started. What should be our focus before the UAT? The first area that I would like to highlight here is the importance of well-managed requirements. I know that well-managed is a broad term, it depends on projects, and also you can have a question, okay, so how should we approach that? Here I would like to emphasize the usage of the INVEST approach. Please raise your hands if you heard about that. Yeah, thank you. Let me just quickly explain it. So INVEST is about independent, negotiable user stories that can be estimated by the team. They are small enough, so when it comes to the user stories and development phase, we are not working out for several weeks or months because it's really hard to track the progress. And last part is that about the testability of the user stories. As we are coming from the tester's world, that's really important. Also, I would emphasize the involvement of client as soon as possible, so not just in the end, because I guess you have experience with that in a negative way. And the last 2 points are based on my experience. So please always document the out of scope and the assumptions part as well, because it can initiate your discussions with the client, and also you will have the chance to initiate any action that can help you to avoid any big problems. Moving forward, I would also talk about the quality assurance part. It's really advised to have a definition of run, done, and ready documented and used on different levels, like stories, epics, and release level as well. Also, I would emphasize the usage of the quality gates on different levels too. What I mean here, like in software engineering projects, for instance, I would mention the usage of SonarQube, so you can enforce the code quality standards with set of rules. The other is that, of course, you and we need to have well-defined unit test coverage. Same goes for the integration tests, system tests, and lastly, we should not forget about the non-functional aspects like security and performance tests. And same goes for the release exit criteria, so we need to know when we can go ahead. The other part is here that I would like to mention is the usage of QA dashboards. It's really important to have information about one place, like about the issues, the test results, so you will have the option to make decisions in a timely manner. And here comes my favorite, quality metrics. I brought some examples for you. For instance, defect containment. We use it with a threshold of 90 or 95%, which is about finding the issues as early as possible. If that's not the case, like in late stages, you have many bugs, this threshold will be violated. The other two, really favorite from this list, is the percentage of reopened defects. Here we usually use the 10%. It means that if we are violating that rule, it means that time to time we are having that issue. For instance, daily example, environment is down every week for 1 day, and we are reopening the same issue again. It helps us to identify root causes and have solutions in place. The other one is the percentage of declined defects. Here we can identify if there is any problem with the requirements, like it's declined because it was not a bug, but it was not evident for us, or, and that's the tricky part, we can assess the quality of our testing. So if we have many rejected bugs because we are reporting invalid ones, it can be a good reflection on our work. And the last point that I would like to mention here is the defect lifetime. Here we use 30 or 40 days as the threshold. So maybe a good exercise for you after the conference is to check how many issues you have in the system that are older than this value. It can be fascinating. So before the UAT, if you have these points in place or these areas, you will have the option for continuous improvements, which means that you can easily identify the problems and you will be able to prioritize the most pressing items. So that's all about the before the UAT considerations. So let's move on to the common pitfalls. The first one that I would like to begin with is the client involvement, which is usually very limited and ad hoc based. So we don't have the option to have timely decision making, and it can impact the whole procedure in terms of the planned efforts. Closely connected, the expectation management, which is usually not in place too. It is about setting the context and aligning on the business goals with the client. Therefore, you will have the option to identify any shortcomings at the beginning. It can be really helpful. The third one is about the schedule, which is also important. We usually tend to forget to allocate enough time because the objective should be in line with the capacity of the team. And also, we need to have a buffer for additional activities like bug fixing, confirmation testing by the client team, and also some kind of analyzation activity might be required. The fourth one here is also a favorite one, is the frequently encountered problem, the completeness of test data. During the development process, we believe that we are testing the application, it works well, we are confident, so we can have a few beers at the end of the day. But then when it comes to the UAT, it turns out that some real-world scenarios are missed by the team, and it can be a huge problem. So it's advised to work with the client. And the last on this slide is the lack of UAT dry run and training. So based on my previous project, I had the experience to work with people in the UAT phase that were non-technical people. So it was really important to have kind of a showcase, a trial, and a walkthrough in order to improve the testing efficiency and make sure that our life will be easier. I have one more slide regarding the common pitfalls. The next one is about undefined entry and exit criteria. It's really important to have rules in place to decide on when we can start the UAT and when we can have the stamp on the product. Usually it's a question that, okay, we completed the testing, but okay, what's next? So how can we validate that? Moving forward, I would also emphasize the importance of monitoring. So when the UAT happens, we need to be able to have information about where we are, and if there are any problems, then it's important to act on them in time. The third one on this slide is about the narrow field of vision. It means that we tend to focus only on certain aspects or capabilities of the application, overlooking some additional features that can lead to undetected problems and potential flaws when it comes to the production environment. The next is a complex one, I know. There is a huge dilemma that shall we have a dedicated UAT environment all the time, or shall we repurpose one of the existing environments to manage that type of activity? Also, we need to consider different factors. So what's our environment provisioning strategy? How can we scale our environment? How can we make the data correct? What are the accesses that we need to provide? So there are certain factors here, and not to mention the cost and also the resource implications that we need to work with when we have a given project. And the last one is also a typical problem. We are missing the lessons learned part. It means that, okay, we completed the UAT, but we haven't learned from it. What I mean here. So usually we don't have feedback from the client. Ask for it, of course. It's easy to say. Also, it can happen that we receive a feedback, but we are not discussing, reviewing, and prioritizing it with the team. Therefore, we won't be able to make any improvements mid and the long run. So you can imagine the consequences. Okay, so these are the common pitfalls that I brought to you today, and I'm curious if you would add more at the end of the presentation. We will see. The question would be here that, okay, so what can we do to, what can we do to avoid them or just mitigate the potential problems? The solution lies in the UAT governance framework that I would like to describe for you. The first one, it starts with the scope and schedule. Scope and schedule, it's really important to align on the objectives and the key functionalities with the client, highlighting the business priority or critical user scenarios that we would like to cover. Also, really important to identify the dependencies in scope and how they can be verified. Typical problem can be that we are working on an integration project with many different teams, and the question can be asked, okay, well, how can we validate that everything works as expected? And the same goes for the last point, is that it's really advised to collect the potential risk with mitigation options in case of occurrence that can set the context at the beginning. Closely connected to this is the definition of roles and responsibilities. Here I would mention the usage of the RACI matrix. RACI matrix is about listing the activities, marking who is accountable, responsible, consulted, and informed. So it can set the context and the understanding for the whole team. When we had the UAT, we also named a UAT test manager. It's not a new position, just from the existing team. The guy who is available to the client, provides support, basically a primary contact, and can be considered as an escalation point as well. Also, of course, you need to know your team, like the UAT testing team. It's also important to have a support team as well. It's also not a new team, it's kind of the set of dedicated people from the existing team who are available in case of the need. And in line with this, I would mention here the service level agreements, the SLAs, that can help us to kind of accelerate this whole procedure. For instance, SLA is about, okay, so in what time frame and how we need to react in case of any issues. For instance, in our case, what we did, P1 problem, environment is down, or critical feature is not working. And the SLA here was that in 1 hour, the team had to analyze the problem and provide recommendations on how and when can we fix that. So it can set the context too. Okay, when it comes to the UAT itself, UAT guidelines can be also really helpful. It can be a set of different documents or just one single support document that contains information about the application itself, the required accesses, the test data, reference to other documents like the UAT execution log that I will just describe in a few seconds. And also information about that, okay, how can you administrate the issues you face during the UAT. Okay, so when we are all set to get started, UAT execution log can help us to have the status and the progress reporting for the team. It also can be very useful to have a documented history of the UAT. It can be also valuable when it comes to auditing purposes. And lastly, it can be a differentiator when it comes to different business domains where there are certain regulations and policies that you need to fulfill. Okay, next one is the UAT monitoring. It is about to have like a tool or a solution in place where you can collect information about the test execution results, the outstanding problems, the reported incidents in one place. It can help you to give the context for everyone and to mitigate any problems on the go. So it can be really beneficial to provide support for the client team. And then comes the UAT ceremonies. In order to manage the expectations and kind of have the continuous communication with the team, it is highly advised to have a UAT daily kickoff meeting. What we did is like basically talking about the daily plans ahead or any outstanding problems we faced. And the same goes for the end of the day activities, where we usually conducted a brief touchpoint meeting with wider management group to have transparency about the activities, set the focus on the outstanding items, and give clarity in case of any problems. So yeah, it can be really helpful. And the last point is about the UAT acceptance procedure. I talked about partially. So here we need to be able to know when we are ready for the UAT. So of course, set of activities should be listed, like, okay, environment identified, deployed, configuration, then access have been verified by the client, and so on. So kind of that's available for us and kind of agreed with everyone. And same goes for the acceptance part. So we really verify that all the features have been verified from different point of view. All the issues have been also reviewed, identified in case of the criticality, and the critical ones have been fixed in the current window, including the verification point as well. So all in all, that can help you to kind of have the stamp on your product when it comes to the acceptance part. So basically that's the baseline for the UAT governance framework. I'm looking forward to the questions if you will have. I'm happy to go into details. And also I hope that you will find this as a kind of useful material to deep dive into your own UAT procedure. So I would like to say thank you for the attention, and I'm looking forward to your questions.
Thank you, Zoltan. And yeah, you have a lot of questions. Are you ready for that?
Yeah,
just drink a bit. Okay. Just take your time.
Thank you.
And if we are ready, let's start Q&A. Okay, first question. Oh, it's 7 likes. Often in projects, time, no, how do you say it? Surprisingly, thank you very much, runs out near, this is my job, runs out near the end, and all of the pitfalls happen. How do we mitigate this?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I would say that usually maybe I can answer it, usually one mistake can be here that UAT should not be planned at the end of the projects. When we kick off the project, we usually focus on the whole procedure and start the discussion, okay, how we would like to manage the UAT. So these discussions should start in parallel with other activities. That's my experience that can help, I think, in this question too.
Next question. It will jump. Or can I start to read? Okay, which deal did you use to measure quality metrics? How did you calculate the percent?
Yeah, good question, and I was expecting that. So first of all, Jira can be used to some extent, but we have different internal tools where you can have different type of statistics, and you can configure that for that purpose. If you don't have such tool or solution in place, I have seen projects to use Excel. I know that it's not the best answer here, but in our case, we had the internal tool set to measure these kind of metrics.
Okay, the third question is, how can you convince the client to be more involved in UAT if they are uninvolved?
Yep, it's also a really good question. I think it comes down to the communication, and yeah, in case you feel that, it should be flagged to the project management part and kind of raise the red flag that this is what we can experience here and this can be the consequence. They can be hard discussions, I would say.
Drink a little, okay?
Thank you.
We have time for the questions, are you? Okay. How do you indicate client involvement when the customer is keeping distance from testing activities and just wants to bug free? SW.
Yeah, absolutely. So first, I think here, there are two things. One is that we usually have like an exit criteria for a release that we can justify in connection with our testing activities, what we did, and these are the issues that we see at the moment. And the other part can be that, okay, the client is not involved, then it's a kind of discussion that how can we complete the UAT. It depends, I would say.
Okay. How do you manage if a requirement was misunderstood and the client wants to function change, but it isn't enough?
Oh.
The time isn't enough. Thank you.
Yeah, in our case, what we had is that, I mean, first, you need to have really good documentation in place. What we had in our case, we call it a change control board with set of people from the client team and from our team as well. Typically, BAs, managers are included, and this is kind of a discussion where we can point out if the kind of documentation one is in place. If we have not well-defined requirements, then it could be a tricky conversation with the client because there can be misunderstandings.
Would you like to have one more question? Because we have a couple of seconds left. You would like to choose, or the next question is good, how to turn QA into UAT mindset?
Okay, so I usually say that if you are a QA, you need to be involved basically in the whole life of the application. I mean that you need to work closely with the BAs to really understand how the application works, and this can help you to kind of broaden your view in terms of the project and the application behavior and the acceptance part as well. So QAs are the ones who basically have to know the whole application in and out.